Coming up, for over 40 years, the World Values Survey has polled almost 500,000 respondents in over 100 countries about politics and a range of social issues. For the first time in over 15 years, the UK has been a full participant in the latest World Values Survey, and the results are quite shocking. Us British have extremely low levels of confidence in our political parties, but what is even more shocking is that a clear majority have more faith in the European Parliament than they do in the Westminster Parliament. It looks like that Brexitist sovereignty argument was just one more Brexit unicorn that's disappeared up its own backside. The rest of the survey results make grim reading for the Brexitist cult and highlights the huge extent to which the British electorate have woken up to the reality of the Brexit con. Stay tuned. I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button, subscribe, and above all, share a link to this video with your social media contacts. On Thursday this week, the Austria-based non-profit association, the World Values Survey, published their latest report, detailing the public's perception of their nation's institutions in over 100 countries across the world. The WVS is one of the largest and most widely used academic social surveys in the world. The data from the survey is interesting in two ways. One, to see how things have changed since 1990 and 2005, the last occasions that the UK participated in this survey, and two, to compare the UK with its peers and see if the Tories have truly made us a world-beating country on any measurable definition of the cliché. Well, spoiler alert, on both counts, it doesn't look good. The UK has internationally low levels of confidence in its political institutions, and confidence in the Westminster Parliament in particular has halved since 1990. What is even more interesting, though, is that while the UK electorate have little confidence in domestic political institutions, its view of the European Union has become increasingly positive post-Brexit. We're now at a level where, in the large UK sample of over 1,000 people, those having confidence in the EU now outnumber those having confidence in the Westminster Parliament or the government by almost 2 to 1. This graph of these statistics tells a very interesting story. The pink line traces the percentage of British people who have confidence in the European Union. The first time the question was asked, back in 1990, nearly half of us had a positive take on the EU. But after many years of the oligarch-owned press banging on about bent bananas and other fake news, and repeating cliches like health and safety gone mad, they managed to grind down their readers to the extent that by the start of the 21st century, the proportion of people having a positive view of the EU had been halved. Until 2009, less than a quarter of the British population had confidence in the EU. But ever since then, even despite the referendum on leaving the EU and the years-long attack on the EU by the Brexit cult, an increasing number of Britons have been won over to the merits of the EU. The latest survey suggests that amongst Brits, they have more confidence in the EU, at 39%, than in the UK Parliament, 23%, or the Tory government, 24%. Now, as we know, the EU-hating Leave voting demographic was dominated by elderly voters, and many of those voting to leave in the 2016 referendum have, sadly, passed on. But that's not the full explanation. The breakdown of figures in the actual report, I've put a link below this video, shows confidence in the European Union rising among all generations, including the older generations. For example, in 2005, 18% of baby boomers, that's my generation just, said they had confidence in the EU, a figure that has almost doubled to 34% now. The other thing that's striking about the breakdown is that confidence levels in the EU amongst the Scots is at 50%. Which leaves Scotland second only behind Spain as having the most positive feelings towards the EU of any European country included in the survey. But it's not just Scotland. The UK public are now far more likely to say they're disappointed, 49%, rather than happy, 24%, that the country voted to leave the EU in the first place, a split that applies across all 4 UK nations, with people in Scotland 59%, and Northern Ireland, 54%, the most disappointed by Brexit. It's based on a large sample of 3,056 adults in the UK up to September last year. Those disappointed with leaving the EU outnumber those happy to have left by more than 2 to 1. And yet, politicians on all sides are still pretending that they can make Brexit work. I'd like to pin their eyelids open and sit them on one of Liz Truss's uncomfortable chairs in front of this graphic until they come to their senses, quite honestly. After 13 years of corrupt, austerity-implementing, law-breaking Conservative governments, we can see that confidence in the UK government now is at pretty low levels compared to other nations. Highest is England at 25% and lowest in Northern Ireland at 17%. These UK rates are far lower than confidence levels in our nearest equivalent countries like France and Germany, where rates are 31% and 44% respectively, and far behind Norway at 59% or Sweden at 51%. This leaves the UK as a whole in the bottom third. We're also in the bottom half for confidence in Parliament. And for confidence in political parties among democratic nations, we have about the lowest rate, along with Italy and France, and way behind Germany and Sweden, for example. I mentioned the press earlier on in this video, and it looks like I'm not the only one to blame the Fourth Estate and the way they frame political issues in the UK for a lot of our nation's woes. The share of the British public who said they had confidence in the press halved between 1981 and 1990, falling from 30% to 14%, where it has more or less remained ever since, mainly because of the increasing confidence levels amongst the pre-war generation, who mainly gorged themselves on unhealthy content in the Mail, Telegraph, the Express or Sun on a daily basis, and who then often feel the need to vomit it back up down at the pub or on the golf course, or even more antisocially on talk radio, social media or BBC Question Time. Of 24 countries, only people in Egypt at 8% have less confidence in the press than people in the UK, 13%. In other words, confidence in their press amongst the British is barely more than a third of the level in comparable countries like France, Germany, Italy and Spain, which suggests to me that something has gone badly wrong with the British press. It seems to me quite wrong that, with some exceptions like The Guardian, most of the major British newspapers are owned by oligarchs who are either foreign or British expatriates living overseas to avoid paying UK taxes, and whose personal interests often seem to be at odds with the interests of the United Kingdom. Alongside the, I think, 137-year-old, newly married American-based Australian Rupert Murdoch, we also have billionaire Jonathan Harmsworth, the 4th Viscount Rothermere, for example, who owns the Daily Mail. Despite owning a mansion in Wiltshire, Harmsworth is a non-dom for tax purposes, having lived in Paris most of his life to avoid UK taxes, and owns his media businesses through a complex structure of offshore holdings and trusts. This is the guy in charge of the UK's best-selling newspaper. Murdoch and Harmsworth and their poisonous tabloid titles help deliver the Brexit that, while doing no harm to them and their own personal interests, has done immense harm to the nation, as the majority of the population now appreciates.
Welcome to the Brexit, sir. I'm sorry.
Oh my God.